Gatsby JS is an open source framework that will allow us to generate static websites using React for the UI components and GraphQL to pull the data from different sources. So in Gatsby, we can pull data from a CMS, such as Contentful, Drupal, WordPress, Strapi, or any other CMS. We can use Markdown files, we can use external APIs, we can use databases, we can use JSON files, etc. In Gatsby, we basically build the static website using web technologies, HTML, CSS, and React to create the components, and we pull the data from the different sources using GraphQL. And then we can deploy our application to AWS, to Netlify, to GitHub. Gatsby is one of the tools that will allow us to generate JAMstack applications. The JAMstack is a way to build and deploy websites by leveraging static website generators such as Gatsby, Next, or Hugo, for example. So the idea with JAMstack is to build the static website and serve that website from a content delivery network or CDN. Here are some of the best practices for JAMstack projects, such as using a CDN, automating the builds, using Git, applying caching invalidation, perform atomic deploys, use modern build tools such as Babel, PostCSS, and Webpack. So this is the JAMstack on AWS. This is one way to implement it. So we build our Gatsby project. We pre-render all the static files and we can deploy our static website to an S3 bucket, and then we can set up CloudFront to use this S3 bucket as the origin to serve the contents using the CDN. And here we have some examples of JAMstack applications. And here we have, for example, this blog that is using Gatsby, React, Contentful, webhooks, etc. We have Green Orbit that is using Amazon S3, the serverless framework, CloudFront, Gatsby, GraphQL, React, and we have Hotmart, for example. And here, this website is using Nuxt.js, SAS, Strapi. Strapi is a headless CMS, CloudFront, S3. So here we have multiple examples of JAMstack projects. And we can extend Gatsby JS using multiple plugins. So we can use this plugin for WordPress. So we can use that CMS as the backend to generate the static website. So we can also use this plugin, Gatsby Source Contentful, to use the Contentful CMS to get the data. And we can also use, for example, this plugin to get the information from any REST API. And here we have an starter library, so we can use any of these projects. So we can clone these repos in our local environment and we can start working with Gatsby JS using those projects as a template. So I'm going to select a starter project. So let me find it, Grayscale. I'm going to use this one. And here we have the Gatsby CLI command that we need to run in order to create a new project using this starter library. Okay, now let's move on to the terminal and let's get started with Gatsby. So first we need to install the Gatsby CLI. We need to install it globally. So this will be npm install -g, and this is Gatsby CLI. Okay, now that the Gatsby CLI is installed, let's clear this. So now let's run a command to get more information about the CLI. So this is Gatsby --help. So these are some of the commands that we can run. We can run Gatsby develop to start a development server that supports hot reloads. So we can work on our project, make changes, and see all those changes in the browser. We can also run Gatsby build to build the static website, Gatsby serve to serve the project that we already built using the previous command. If we run Gatsby info, we can see environment information. We have Gatsby clean, we have Gatsby repo, and some others. And we have this one, Gatsby new, that will allow us to create new projects with Gatsby. So let me clear this. And if we run Gatsby info, we're going to see information about the system, operating system, CPU. So we need to use Node 10 or newer. And these are the browsers that I have installed. And this is the version of the CLI. Okay, let's clear this. And now let's go to the website and let's grab this command that will allow us to create our project using this started repo. So let's paste this. I'm going to make this name shorter. Let's call it Gatsby starter Let's run this. So this is going to clone that starter repo or template repo, and it's going to install all the libraries and packages that we need for the project. Okay, our new Gatsby site has been successfully bootstrapped. We can start developing running these two commands. So we can go to the folder where this project was downloaded, and we can start our development server using Gatsby develop. So let's clear this and let's enter to the project. So this is Gatsby starter, and let's open Visual Studio Code. Okay, so here we have the project, and we can start the development server. We can run Gatsby develop. So we can make changes, and we can see those changes in the browser. So I'm going to move this, I'm going to close this, and let me open the browser side by side so we can see all the changes. And here we have the development version of the website. So we can make some changes. First, let's take a look at some of the important files in Gatsby. So here we have the Gatsby config, for example. Let me close this. So here we have different plugins that we can use to get data. For example, here, this Gatsby source file system will allow us to get data from the file system. And we can also use this same plugin to get markdown files from this path. So if we go to that path, this is content blocks. Here we have different files with data that we can use to render in our pages. So going back, there are some other plugins that we can use. For example, plugin React Helmet. So React Helmet is a reusable React component that will manage all the changes that we made to the document head. We have Gatsby Transformer Sharp, we have Gatsby Plugin Sharp, and Gatsby Transformer Remark, and we have some other plugins here. And we're going to install a plugin to deploy the application to S3. So I'm going to show you that later. So here we can see the pages that are part of the project. We have this index file, and here we're gonna see this React component that is actually a function component. So this is the home page. So these are all the components that are part of the home page. We have a layout, we have an SEO component, and we have a list of nodes. So for example, if we go here to the intro component, we can access that component here. So if we go there, here we can make some changes. For example, here we have, let me show the browser. So here we can change, for example, this title here. So we can use, for example, pragmatic reviews. So I'm going to save this, and we're going to see that this is going to change. So it's going to rebuild the bundle, and it's going to regenerate the HTML here. So, and we can also here Gatsby, let's say tutorial, and again, if we save, it's going to refresh the component, and it's going to render this on the browser. Okay, so there are some other things that we can change. For example, here we have these content blocks that are part of this HTML here. So for example, this one is actually this first document here. So we can change it. We can say hi. And if we save this, it's going to refresh, and it's going to apply the changes in the page again here. Okay, so this is just an overview of some of the capabilities of this tool. Some other things that we can modify here is the site metadata. For example, we can change the title of the site, the description, the author of the site. So for example, here, this is the title, Grayscale Promo. So we can change this. So we can say pragmatic reviews, save this, and we need to refresh to apply the changes. And it's going to restart the development server to apply that change. Okay, and as we can see here, we have the new title as pragmatic reviews. Okay, and another important thing besides using React to create the different components of the website is that we have GraphQL to fill the data within these components and to render the components using that data. So something that we can use as part of this development server to get what is the data that is consumed by the application or can be consumed by the application. So we can use this URL underscore 3 times GraphQL, and here we can access all the data running different queries. So here I have this query, for example, where I can access this one, where I can access the metadata of the website. So if I run this, I'm gonna get the information that I just changed it. So for example, here I get the title, the description, and the author of the website. I can also access the different files that are part of the application. So if I go here, and here I select the nodes. So basically this works like a graph, right? Where you have the edges, you have nodes, and then you can access the contents of each node. In this case, a node will be a file. So I can access different properties of that file, such as the relative path, the public URL, the modification time, and things like that. So for example, here I can select different attributes, such as the relative path. So with this here, this is the relative path attribute. I can also access the public URL, for example, and I can access, let's say, the modification time or modified time, this one. And now if I run this, besides the site metadata, I'm gonna get all the different files that are part of the application. So in this case, we have all these images, and these are the markdown files that I'm using to render the contents on the website. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And as you can see here, these are all the files that are the source to render the data within the React components. Remember that besides using these markdown files, we can also use a JSON file, we can use an external API, an external CMS. So we can use different plugins to get the data from multiple sources, WordPress, Contentful, REST APIs, etc.